Hi guys, welcome to the Healeyverse creations. Today I'm going to be trying my best to talk you through how I made this pretty cool warriors, assassins, utility belt, war belt, whatever you prefer. It is a waist belt, probably a bit misleading being on my shoulder, but it is a waist belt. And you may notice there's a lot of things already on here. And these are all things that we've already made on this channel, so if you feel like going and checking them out, if you haven't already of course, then at the end of this video, after you've liked and left a comment and subscribed if you haven't already, definitely subscribe, because then you'll get notified when we post more things in the future, and it means you have easy access to the channel to go back and watch the things we've already posted, so it just makes sense. That said, I'm going to get into this and stick around till the end, because we're going to actually put our costumes together for the first time. I don't think we've done a proper showing of our costumes, especially not since we've upgraded them. Just for mine. Katie's will be on a separate video. Hopefully you stick around to the end, and yeah, let us know what you think. Please make some noise in the comments, please. Okay, so first of all, before I get too far into this, a pretty big thing that our projects have been leaning into recently have been our LARP characters. And I've realised we've showed you the journey of all the things we've made, but we haven't really shown you the collection of everything as it goes. Stick around till later on in the video and I will show you how they all look together with our combined things. There's also a new thing that we've got in there that we didn't make. It was a gift from a family member of ours. My uncle gave me a couple of these pretty cool jackets before Christmas. And he gave them to both me and Katie, but I'd be lying if I said I hadn't pretty much definitely stolen one of them, because it looks really good with the rest of my costume stuff. So thank you to my lovely wife for not arguing with me on that point, and thank you very much to my uncle for giving them to us in the first place, and of course thank you to his friends who gave them to him to give to us. Very kind of them, and they will be used a lot. So with that said, let's get into the belt, because it's been a while since I actually started this thing. If you remember, it was either the dagger pouch thing or the, what was it? It was either the dagger pouch or the axe rings. I mentioned that I'd had to put a project on pause because I'd run out of glue and I had to wait for the glue to turn up. Well, the day has finally come where I finished the project that I ran out of glue on. So the first stage of it was I wanted a warrior's belt, and initially I had actually designed it to go across the top of my gambus and fold like this, but then as Katie was making it, I realised it'd be very difficult for her to have to then try and fit that into the design of the fold that she'd already got so far. So what I decided to do was redo that and make it so that it was an actual removable belt separately, because then I figured I can do a bit more with it and Katie doesn't have to worry about then trying to attach everything that I've attached together already onto a piece of material, thick padded quilted material I'd like to add. So what I ended up doing was redesigning it to this. Now again, we'll put it on the screen, probably here. Katie will put it on the screen, probably there. And that was kind of what I was going for. It's changed a little bit because I wanted it to, and certain things just didn't look how I'd imagined them. So I was like, I'm going to change it, simplify it a little bit, and then add a few more details in places that I feel it needs it. A lot of things that I did add to this were with the idea of future projects attaching to them. So for example, if I want to make leg armor, I wanted to make sure that there were a couple of points on this belt that I could potentially tie on, like thigh armor greaves sort of things. And the same with the top. If I wanted any like harnesses or belts or anything that could easily clip onto this thing, I wanted to make sure there was plenty of rings available to attach it to, rather than having to feed it through the straps. So yeah, with that in mind, I realised I'd set myself a little bit of a project. And that, I looked at it at first and I was like, sorry, I've got something in my eye. I looked at it at first and I was like, oh my god, this is going to be a lot of sewing. So I kind of got rid of the middle triangle bit for two reasons. One, it was way too thick, because I was doing this back piece with three layers of leather anyway. So that would make it up to like 6 layers in certain points, and that was just ridiculous. I didn't need that. I opted out of that idea. I got rid of that because I was like, initially I was going to have it so that it could slot a knife through, and then I made the designated knife pouch thing, so it was like, well, that's pointless. So I cancelled that idea, and then I reutilized that back section later on. We'll get into that. So the first thing, I had my design, I had my idea that I was going for. I needed to start making templates. What I ended up doing was making the 3 main pieces. I made the back piece, one of the side pieces, and then what would be the front piece on either side, because then I could use that same template for the 2 outside pieces for this side as well. The back piece was one, and then obviously if I made 2 templates, one for each individual piece, there was room for failure, more so than making everything off just one template. So that was what I did. I kind of made it up and just used these, I can't remember what they're called. You know, the things that you use when you're in school and you're attaching things together and you like poke the two golden ends through and then they like open out to hold the paper against the thing. Well, I used them just to figure out if I could hold this on my back and then pull it around where it needed to go to. And to be honest, as luck turned out, I managed to get it pretty perfect first time, because that doesn't always happen. As anyone who makes these kind of things know, you can often spend hours and hours and hours just trying to tweak it in a little bit more and a little bit more. If only I'd had that same luck when it came to the final piece with lining all the stuff up, but we'll get into that. So I have my paper templates. The next thing I had to do was get some leather to cut it all out of. Now, why didn't I make this all out of just one big piece, you may be wondering. Well, let me inform you, dear viewers, I can't afford leather. Not good leather anyway, so everything I make is pretty much made up of layers and layers and layers of stuff, all attached together to then try and look as pretty but out there as possible. Like I said, I don't want anything to copy anyone else's. Not to say that I don't like taking inspiration from others. This was very much Skilltree did a video about a year or so ago where he made a load of different roguey assassin pieces, and I was like, that belt though, that belt's really cool. I think he made it as more of a harness, but I wanted something that could be used in multiple classes. Could be used if you're more of like a dark assassin-y type character, or if you were like a big barbarian champion, you could have this big thick leather war belt. It doesn't need all the extra things dangling off it, it can just be the leather belt at its core with adornments. So once I'd got all the pieces of leather, I don't know if you can hear this rain, I apologise in advance if you can. So after I'd got all the pieces of leather cut out, it was then a case of figuring out how I wanted which bit glued where, what layers had overlap where, because as you could see from the paper template there was an overlap on the pieces. So since everything was multiple layers, what I decided to do was the back piece and the two front pieces were going to have an open edge when I glued it all together initially, that then the little off-sided square shape would then sandwich in and I could close them over it on either side, and that would be like the inside layer. How this bit overlaps here and this bit overlaps here, will it do the same thing inside as well? So it's not just a piece butted up to another piece and then another piece that side. That's closed and that's closed, so that the piece in the middle is sorry about that, I have kids and boy do they like the crab rave. Couldn't help it. Back on track. First thing I did was I got this Evo stick spray stuff, spray contact adhesive. That was like big pieces of leather. I can just cover it in Evo stick and then just peel those side bits back open, and then when everything was dried and set, then I could just and then stick that piece in and everything would be done. Well, about 2 days later I went to pick them up and they just fell apart. So just goes to show the Evo stick spray adhesive spray adhesive is probably not meant for these kind of projects. I think it's because when you apply the glue yourself, I think you get a chance to press it into all these fibres and everything and really get it in there so that when you press them together it's got a deep contact of the two surfaces. And I think with the spray adhesive it just coats everything on the top layer, so then when you press it together it just presses those two flat layers of glue together and then the leather can just peel away, is my assumption, because I use Evo stick contact adhesive all the time. I used Evo stick contact adhesive to do this project. It just wasn't the spray version, it was the poisonous don't breathe it in or you're gonna unalive version, which is always really fun and not the cheapest but also not the most expensive, so not for how good a job it does anyway. It was at this point I didn't have any glue so more projects ended up going and taking the place, and then eventually I got my glue, and then I had to finish the next couple of projects that I was doing, so then I had to get more glue. I think I'm on like glue number 3 at this point, but I got it done eventually. I mean, I did get it done a while ago, but then I've also been putting off attaching all the pieces because, as you saw from the opening clip, there's a lot of pieces, there's a lot of sewing and hand sewing. It's a cool belt, that's all that matters. It's a cool belt and it's over now. It's over now. Anyway, I got all the pieces glued together. I left these slots open at the side, and then I glued those two pieces in. Now, at this point I decided that since I had the gambeson and I'd seen how it looked, I wanted something that tied them together, something so that it looked like they were made to go together but also could be worn separately. I decided to add more sewing for myself. Why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I add more sewing for myself? So I decided to do this crisscross, like gambeson-esque crisscross, the same crisscross that's on my gambeson fold that Katie made for me in this video here. If you haven't seen it, go check it out because it's very cool. Do it after this video though. But yeah, so I decided I was going to add this crisscross pattern to it, which needed to match, so I needed to make sure I did it all the same dimension, all the same distances apart that I did on the gambeson. Luckily I did the markings for all the sewing on the gambeson as well, so I had it in my head of what I'd done. I could just repeat the process. So they were pretty much the two first pieces that I did. I did the crisscross sewing on one side, and then I sewed all around the half of the centre and the outside, and then I realised I should probably film some of this for you guys, because I'd been on a bit of a hiatus from getting out the camera stuff. So I was like, well, I'll do so much and then I'll record the last bits. I've since been asked if I can include more of the process, so if there is not enough of the process in this one, I apologise. I had already filmed a lot of it before I had this request made. I will definitely in future try and make sure I include more of the process. After I got those bits attached, I was like, right, get the camera out, let's film attaching these last few bits. What I decided to do was pretty much a running stitch around the entirety of the thing. Then on these two front side pieces, I decided to go back around again and do a whip stitch. So I only did a single running stitch going all around the two pieces that are going to sit at the front. So there's a break every stitch, and then the stitches run too, so it looks like it's sewn on in little squares like that, and it looks pretty cool. Let me know if you'd have done that differently. Curious to know what you think. The next thing I had to do was figure out exactly what strap sizes I was going for with these belt loops, because again, I want the belts to be separate. I want to be able to change the belts at a later date. At the moment, I've got two that I kind of like with it. They were bought for me a couple of years ago. I think they're from Amazon, but I had to mess around with one of them, dyeing it from like the tacky brown colour that it came as, and it looked kind of nice now. It's kind of rough and rustic looking, and they both have the same pattern on it, so it kind of looks like they're made together but differently, if that makes sense. So I decided to go for these two belts because they're the same width, they're the same length, they're the same everything, just slightly different colours. And since I was going for a black and brown colour scheme anyway, worked perfect. So I was like, right, so I'm going to make sure all of the belt loops are brown. And then what I also wanted to do was, on the possibility that at a later date I want to be able to use maybe a thicker belt, I'm going to do them two slightly different sizes. So the two very front loops are slightly bigger, and the back middle loops are also slightly bigger, so that a thicker belt can go through just those three if need be. Problems for a later date, I wanted there to be variety. I'm happy. Moving on. So then once I'd got all these laid out, obviously the next thing I had to do was get them attached. So the first thing I did, and I did this off camera to save you time and to save me backache, I attached all the tops first. So I lined them up. I thought I'd lined them up properly, because the time before it I did it and I eyeballed it and looked down the belts and got them all perfect. I didn't do that this time, so there is a very slight wiggle at one of the points, but it's fine. So yeah, I got the tops of all of these belt loops attached, and then I could slide the belt up into them and then just hold them down over the top, punch the hole so that I knew they weren't going to be flat, because that was one thing I didn't want, which is a mistake I'd made on the knife pouch. I didn't want that with this. I wanted to make sure there was comfortably room for these two belts to go through. So that was what I did. Got all them punched, got all them sewed down. Now it was onto all the attachments, which was for the most part fine. It was kind of a case of cutting out these little squares of leather and then figuring out exactly where I wanted them, how equal I wanted them. Another thing I'd done was move the two pieces of cord from this side of the pouch. This one, if it's not easy enough to line up, then we'll just put the individual picture of that side here. There's two pieces of cord intended to hang down here. I decided I didn't want them hanging down in my way. What I've done with those is move them around to the back, just so that then I have the option to tie things on, or to like tie on a little dagger sheath or something like that on the back if I don't want to wear the whole belt, but I don't have to have something there, and it can just tuck under the belts and be completely and utterly out of the way, not snag on things, not get me snared up. Which is my only concern for having all these little D-rings, is I'm like, what if I walk past the wrong thing at the wrong time and end up getting hooked and snagged, ripping something off? That's why I decided to only go for one piece of leather to hold all these little D-rings on, because I was like, maybe they won't be strong enough to hold on forever, but if they tear, I can always just put a new one on. If I make it thick enough that they don't tear and it rips a chunk out of the belt, I'm going to be very upset. So, small and flexible it is. Once I had all those on, oh no, sorry, one thing I haven't talked about at this point, the little belt strap. I wanted there to just be an extra little loop that I could potentially hang like a sword frog or axe ring or whatever, because I'm putting an axe ring on this side, but I want a little strap this side that I can either just undo and hang little pouches on or tie things through. Like I said, another thing I wanted with this, full utility. I wanted to fit my knife pouch, my sword frog, the axe ring, the coin purses, my little sunglasses case that I used to hold my phone when we go to these events. I wanted to fit all the stuff, which it does. I managed to get everything to line up pretty perfectly, so if I want to, I can have this thing fully adorned with all of my extra hanging thing. And another thing I'm going to do at a later date is make a couple of separate sword frogs that hang on this belt specifically, because as much as I love the big sword frog that I made, it's a lot, and I don't necessarily want to use it for every single event because I really like it and I don't want to risk it getting destroyed. I'd rather have something a bit more simple that I can use as and when I feel like it. So we've got the belts, we've got the buckles, we've got the D-rings, we've got pretty much everything. One thing that I didn't mention was when it came to actually sticking all these pieces together, I did do it ever so slightly off, so the back piece was slightly further over on this side than it was on this side. It's millimeters, like 2 maybe 3 millimeters, and you can't tell from looking, but I know, and now you know. Shh, don't tell anyone. They'll think I'm not very good. Unfortunately, at the point we're at, I don't have my D-ring. I do have the one that I use to line up the little anchor point for where my D-ring is going to go on, but this one's a bit smaller. I want a 50mm, which is like this big, and this one's like 30, so it won't fit. It'll fit some axes, but it won't fit all axes. I want this thing to hold all axes, including LARP ones, maybe like the one that we got given. So it's not attached yet. Hopefully it'll turn up between now and the thumbnail, so that the thumbnail doesn't just have an empty flap of leather swinging. How Healeyverse, eh? Right, so we're at the point where I can show you the thing, and I don't think I've missed anything. Oh yeah, before I get into it, one thing that I forgot to mention, obviously I wanted to make this belt, but as I mentioned earlier, I didn't have enough leather to make it out of one piece, so I had to cut it all out of individual pieces. Luckily, I had 2 semi-decent sized pieces that overall I had enough of the 2 pieces that I could make the outside of the entire thing. So all of it is technically, visually, all of it is the same leather on the outside. It's just from 2 separate pieces that were like triangle-y square mutations of shapes. And yeah, that had just enough. It was perfect. I had like the skinniest scraps left over by the time I was done cutting it up. So let's see the thing. One thing I have done since first setting this up on the table to have a look at for finale purposes, I've moved the belt loops around to the side so that I don't have both of them hanging down between my legs for every single thing I'm trying to do. That's dead annoying. As it worked out, one of them has to go around to the gambesony part and the other one has to just go through the first. I'll show you what I mean. I'm just going to move that away a little bit because I know what I'm like. Look at that. Oh, I sat down to film it and Katie looked over and she went, "You made a cool thing." I'm like, just take a minute for the applause. You know when I said our recent end of year video that we've definitely leveled up the leather skills? This is mint. I love this thing. It's so cool and it looks really cool with the rest of the stuff that I've got as well, which I've kept you waiting long enough. Let's show you how this looks. So the first thing that I'm going to put on is this jacket that my uncle gave us. I really like this thing. I really like the colours of it, and then all the brown kind of Celtic symbols really just pop, and they really match the other browny tones that I've got on things. Next thing over that is going to be my gambeson fold that Katie made for me. I love this thing. I absolutely love this thing, even just as is, without the belt, without any of the other things, with nothing else. I love this thing so much. After that, I'm going to try this cowl that Katie made for me a few months ago. I think it'll go pretty well with the theme of everything I'm going for, kind of rangery, assassin, rogue. Like I said, I'm not personally doing too much barbarian stuff with it myself. I'm more stealthy woodsy. So this green hood went absolutely perfect. Next thing I'm going to be adding is this armour that I made in my last creations video. It's my first foam piece of proper armour that I've made specifically for LARPing. Again, I was really happy with how this kind of went in with the whole look, and given that the shoulders on this thing still annoy me a little bit, I kind of like the way the hood distracts from that a little bit. And then last but not least, it's time, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this belt on. Tell me that is not the coolest look. I feel like an assassin. I feel like a rogue badass. I've seen video game characters that look less cool than this guy. So leave a like if you agree. I think that's hella cool. Personally, as someone who grew up playing like Assassin's Creed games, thinking Aragorn was Ranger badass and, you know, all these things. And I love how all of these things have kind of come together, and I kind of feel like my own little weird amalgamation of all of my favourite characters growing up. So I'm a very happy nerdy boy right now. I can't wait to try all these things like out at an actual LARP event. You'll notice I don't have any of the accessory things attached to it at the minute. That's because I'd already put the belts on to film this video, and I was like, probably should have did that. However, what I will do, if you've subscribed, turn on notification, because that will let you know when we post our next video. And in our next video, I'll show you what it looks like with all the other stuff as well, plus whatever it is that I've made to go with it. I'm hoping by then the new thing that Katie's made for me will also be out on video, so then I can have that on it as well. And it's just all the exciting things, guys, all the exciting things. We're also going to be doing the same thing for Katie's stuff, because we've made her a lot of stuff for her costume now. We can do her own video of her costume in the future, and then we can always chuck it all in a playlist. So If you find yourself enjoying this costume and wanting to make yourself something similar, you'll have some kind of guidelines and notes to go by checking out this playlist. It will show you most of what we've done with it. Any questions, always feel free to ask us. Always happy to have the conversation with you. But that has been it for this one. I hope you've enjoyed. I know I have. I've really enjoyed making this. I haven't really enjoyed making this. I've really enjoyed having this as a finished product. It made it totally worth not wanting to do the sewing, not wanting to get it all glued together. You're always going to panic when it comes to doing things that are undoable. But you know what? Once you get them done, oh, does it feel nice. That's my wise words of wisdom. Anyway, I'm going to go before I start rambling too much. Quick guys, run away. We'll see you on the next one, whatever that may be. If you've made it to this point, you're an absolute diamond, and I think you're pretty cool, and we could probably be friends.